Hello, everybody, and welcome to our bookseller panel. My name is Mary Boone. I am on the advisory committee for SCBWI, our Western Washington chapter. We are so glad to have you join us because the relationship between authors and illustrators and booksellers is so important. We wanted to take some time to talk to booksellers, independent booksellers from right here in Western Washington. And instead of wondering what they wish authors knew, we are going to find out what they wish authors and illustrators knew. So with me this evening, I've got three incredible independent booksellers from up in the northern part of the state to down in the South Sound. We've got Rene Holderman, who is the buyer for the children's buyer for Third Place Books and their Seattle locations. Seattle area locations. They have in Lake Stevens. Yes. And then I've got Kendra Calitri from Village Books at the Fairhaven location. And she's the children's buyer up there. And then I've got Allyson Howard, who with her husband Jason owns Invitation Bookshop in Gig Harbor. And I'm going to give them each just a couple minutes to give you an idea about their experience and their shops in case you haven't been there yet. So let's start with Rene.
Hi, I've been a buyer at Third Place Books for probably 10 plus years. I have worked at Third Place Books for 25 years, and I buy for all three locations, but I work out of the Lake Forest Park location. And it's about 15,000 square feet, and the other two stores are around 3,500 square feet, and they have a separate eating. All the bookstores have a place to eat. We have new and used books, and I buy from big publishers and small publishers.
That's awesome. Thank you.
You're
Kendra?
So I work at Village Books. As you said, we're about 40 minutes from the Vancouver, BC border. We're situated right on Bellingham Bay. It's a beautiful historic building, 3 stories. We're connected to 2 cafes. And then we also have another location, which is in Lyndon, Washington, even closer to Canada. And that is a much smaller store, but also connected to a cafe. So it's a beautiful, cozy places to be. And we also have new, used, and bargain titles. And we order from the big pubs and we get self-published and we have it all.
Terrific. Thanks for joining us. And Allyson, if you want to give us a little bit of information about you and your store.
Absolutely. So I own Invitation Bookshop here in Gig Harbor, Washington. We are the baby store on this panel. So we opened in 2020, and honestly, you could probably fit several of my store in either one of Rene or Kendra's stores. But we carry strictly new books, but for all ages. So, we do have a kids section. In addition to pretty highly curated, just given our size, we're about 1,400 square feet. So pretty highly curated, general interest. So yeah.
I just as a side note will say that I read an article, I believe it was in the heat of COVID, that Allyson and her husband were opening in a bookstore, and I thought, oh, good Lord. And they have weathered the storm and come out strong.
Yeah.
Woo!
It's definitely in the heat of COVID. We signed our lease about 2 weeks before Washington shut down.
Oh, my word.
We were too far to turn back. So we've made, well, knock wood, we've made it. I feel like
you did it. Yeah.
So
yes. Well, I'm going to jump in here on questions, and I'm hoping that you guys will just jump in and answer what you want. If you just want to take a pass on a question, feel free to do that. But for many of us on the author illustrator side, the process of how bookstores decide what titles they're going to carry is an absolute mystery. So I'm hoping that you guys can shed a little light on what the timeline and process look like. Like if a picture book is releasing in the summer, when are you getting a preview of that? How are you hearing about it? When are you deciding to order it? Just Enlighten us all, please.
Mhm. Well, I mean, if it's a summer release, then I'm probably seeing it as soon as fall the previous year, if not right after the holidays in February. Seeing it in catalogs on Edelweiss, reps talking about titles that they're excited about, sending emails, word of mouth. And also just emails from authors reaching out, being like, I'm really excited about this book. Please carry it.
I think I've sent some of those emails. I'm pretty sure I have. So what about the Rene? Yeah.
I probably see books for summer during when I'm buying, I guess right now, January, and going into February. And I also see we do consignment, and authors reach out, and I try to I prefer email on that just because my days are pretty packed. But and I just look, and I also listen to what the reps have to recommend. If it's an illustrated book, I try to read them all. It's just sometimes depending on the publisher and how they open up on Edelweiss, it can be hard sometimes depending what they're using. And then I also look at how much book love the books have, if anybody on staff has read the book yet. And for middle, I mean, I try to read just the beginnings of each book. I can't get them all read. I just don't, there's not enough hours in the day.
Allyson, are you different
Yeah,
on your?
I would say, we're right about on that same timeline. Actually, I spent a good portion of today building orders for summer. Yeah.
No, it's crazy.
Kind of like what Rene said, it's really helpful because on Edelweiss, with picture books, I can go through all the F&Gs for picture books and actually see, potentially what we might have coming into the store. ARCs start landing probably right around Christmas time. We start getting summer arcs, and we're all like, we don't have time for this right now.
Exactly.
We don't want to look at any more books. Take them back.
Yes,
You have
please
reps
halt all emails until January 1st.
Thank you. Yes. You have reps reaching out during December. Hey, can we schedule a appointment? I'm not even looking at this until after the holidays. Yes.
Good to know. Well, and you mentioned, you were talking a little bit about word of mouth or book talk. Tell me about reviews. I mean, how important is it that you're going to check the Kirkus review or the School Library Journal review before you decide to carry something?
To be honest, I don't really look at them very often. I look what is on Edelweiss and what the reps have to say and what other booksellers have to say. I look at past titles, but also just even the cover. Like if it's a good cover, I will more likely open it to read a few pages or to look at the illustrations and the content. It's important.
100%. The cover is so important, and it also draws you in because each publisher, if they're big, you're looking at 100 probably picture books.
Yeah.
And that's just one publisher, right? So you need something to kind of help you narrow down a little bit. And I guess I mostly rely on what the rep has written, the markup in the catalog, and also what booksellers have said. I don't really look at Kirkus or the other reviews as much.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say I tend to look at reviews more for adult books than for kids books, because I find that our readers of adult books tend to pay more attention to those, where that is not something that necessarily, when a 10-year-old is shopping in the store with a parent, they have no idea what School Library Journal said about a book. But I will say school librarians are fantastic. So
Yes.
I have several school librarians who come into our store, and I absolutely pay attention to what they have to say about books.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. I do too. Yes.
Then talk to me about new authors. How are you finding out that I mean, we all know when a Mo Willems book is coming out, right? The whole world knows. But how do you know that there's a new book coming out from maybe an author who lives in Seattle, or it's their debut book? How are you getting that news? And how are you trying to balance these new debut authors with the classics that everybody wants to buy?
Mm-hmm.
It usually will tell us in the catalog, or most reps will let you know it's a debut author, and also if they live in the area. If they live in the area, I always try to carry it because oftentimes local authors will stop by to sign. Plus, I like to support local authors, but that's what I go by is what's on Edelweiss, and my reps are good, and they will let me know. And the word of mouth, I mean, having your book on Edelweiss obviously is the best. If it's something that's only coming from Ingram, then that would be the author getting in contact to let us know about it,
Mm-hmm.
at least for me.
Mhm. And the other source that it's not quite the same as having an author email, but occasionally PNBA will send out
Oh,
emails that highlight local books that just for whatever reason I missed in a catalog or from a smaller press. And so that's a really good way to catch some of those too, and they're very aware of that.
Okay.
and also at the trade show too is helpful at PNBA and children's.
Okay, so this is the thing. I'll say, oh, I went and talked to Lizzie at Salmonberry, or I went and talked to Kate at Ballast, or I went and talked to Allyson at Invitation. And my friends will say, oh my God, you're just talking to booksellers. Now, you guys may hate it, but my sense is that you like to know when authors come in, or you like to know that they live in the area. Am I completely off base? And if I'm not, how should people be approaching you to let you know, hey, I live in the area, I've got books coming out, or I have books that are already, out there?
Yeah, I don't mind when authors, and I love when authors come into the bookstore, maybe to drop off an arc or, chat about their book. What's going to catch my attention too is if they are trying to create a partnership with us. So if they're supporting us and buying stuff in the bookstore or sending, people our way, like, oh, they're carrying our book, they're carrying my book, please shop there, versus maybe Amazon. That to me is gonna make me want to champion their book even more.
That's a really good point. That's
Yeah. And I also love emails. So like if they email me and say like I am from, the PNW area, that also does catch my attention. If they're just giving me the book title and the ISBN, that gives me no back matter to who they are. I want to know, stuff about you, what kind of research you did for your book. Tell me where you're from. That is what's gonna really catch my attention.
I
or
think a big
what
part.
inspired you. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. You go ahead, Allison. I'm
I
sorry.
think a big part of it is that relationship that the author can create
Yeah.
with bookstores. I mean, Mary, you're rattling off names of, my colleagues and booksellers who I work with on a regular basis. And I think honestly, I knew you as a customer in our store before I even knew you were an author. And so knowing that, and I think we're in kind of a unique situation because you are so close to my store, but knowing that you were a champion, not just of our store, but of independent bookstores, that you understand the work that we do, why it's difficult, why that curation piece is sometimes hard, and can help us navigate that just through conversation and relationship is really, really helpful.
Yeah.
And
I
Renee,
think, oh,
I know that you bounce from store to store, right? But
yeah,
you still want to meet authors, yes?
I do. The best way not to just appear at the store, unless you're shopping, that's fine, of
Yeah.
course. But to reach out with an email, and then we could set up a time, or if you want to drop off your book, you can always just drop it off and say, hey, can you please give this to Renee at the info desk? But because sometimes I'm in the middle of things and I feel bad because I'm rushed, and I don't want to do that to an aspiring author. So just having a heads up ahead of time.
Mhm.
And
For
illustrators.
us being so, sorry, for
The
us
same
being
goes
so
for
small.
illustrators, right? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The same goes for illustrators. We want to meet the local illustrators,
Yeah.
Oh,
especially.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We have some
Yeah.
great illustrators in the area too, so this brings me to self-published and folks who are published through hybrid presses. And I'd love to know your store policies regarding carrying these books, but also any advice. I know a lot of folks they spend a lot of money getting these books published, and then they get really frustrated that they can't get them into bookstores. So
Mhm.
take some time and let's give them some good advice headed forward.
Well,
Okay.
oh,
No, you go
Come
ahead.
on,
You go
Kendra.
ahead.
thank you. Well, on the PNBA website, they have a list of regional bookstores. The first thing I would do is to look at the list and see, okay, let me start with a few of these, go on their website, see if they have, a consignment program or a buyer's email, do a little research and find out who to talk to before you just like head into the bookstore. Or, try to see
That's
who you should
excellent.
contact.
Yes. Yes. That is excellent advice. And just knowing some of the information ahead of time when you come in or when you're
Mhm.
doing an email really helps a lot.
Yeah. Like we have a wonderful, like robust consignment program. And I do feel bad when people come in holding a pile of books. And I'm like, oh, did you go on our website and fill out the consignment form or
Yeah.
talk to our consignment coordinator? And when it's a no, it's like, it's sad. I'm like, well, they're not
Mhm.
here right now. So now
Right.
you have to come back another day. And, it's disheartening for them. And I feel bad as well. So yeah, just finding out a little information first is, about the store before just approaching is good.
Yeah, that research piece is really important because we're so small that oftentimes, I wear a whole lot of hats. And so when someone comes in wanting us to look at a book for consignment, I can't stop in the middle of a work day and look at a book. And then I feel like I don't want to be dismissive of a person because I know like that's their book. That's a labor of love. But I can't fairly look at it in that moment when my brain might be on, whatever social media thing we have going on or something else. So I think doing that extra bit of research and reaching out and really finding out what the store's policies are and how the store prefers to do it is essential.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, I agree. We have a similar consignment program also. So finding that out ahead of time, what paperwork to bring in and to talk to the consignment coordinator, it helps a lot. If the book's available at Ingram at a regular discount and returnable, then oftentimes we'll just do that and bring it in from Ingram once I've had a chance to look at it.
Yeah, we do the same.
And are most consignment programs, I've never sold a book on consignment, so I'm just going to be like a total dummy about this. But explain to me how that's working. And does everybody do the same rate? I don't understand how it works.
I'm going to be perfectly honest. I don't exactly know because it's not my department. I'm sorry.
I know we have like an initial fee to carry it. And then I know, we cut checks for when they sell. I don't know how long or how many they sell before we do that. But I mean, we're constantly calling authors to bring more in. So, and then we have like a featured author display where people can, opt in to put their book on there for, 2 months, 3 months at a time. So that really boosts, customers seeing that. Yeah, so there's options, and I'm also not in charge of that, so I don't know all the details.
Allyson, I'll bet you are in charge of it.
I am in charge of it, and honestly, that sounds really similar to ours. We usually do a 6-month consignment. I don't charge a fee to carry, but we also don't have, we're a much smaller store, so we don't have quite as much demand, I'm sure. But yeah, it's a 6-month period. We usually, if we sell out during that period, we'll call and ask for more. And then at the end of the 6 months, we kind of reevaluate, is this working for us? Is it working for the person whose book we have on consignment? And kind of decide from there.
And the consignment, are you looking, again, I know this isn't your areas for Kendra and Rene, but I'm assuming these are primarily regional authors, not folks outside of the region.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
As a general rule, I only take consignment from people who are within driving distance of the store, because otherwise we have to pay to ship books back, and I'm not dealing with that.
And that's the same for us also.
Okay.
Yeah, the majority of ours, I think, are in Whatcom County, just even.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ours are all fairly local, and then we put up little like book talk tag is a local author under their title on a face out.
Nice. I would imagine I'm not the only author or illustrator out there who doesn't really completely understand the book business. What do you wish we all knew about running it, about, independent bookstores, that you think is a general misconception, or just something creatives don't get or don't know?
That it's just speaking specifically for kids books, that like illustrated books, it's a saturated section or a saturated category. So the title needs to stand out in some way. Or, maybe being something specifically about the area or local. That's always a really good selling point. Your book, for example, though, is because it's a nature science title. And so that's actually a little bit easier if it's nonfiction versus fiction titles.
All right.
Mhm.
Anything else?
I mean, I would love for authors who want us to carry, especially children's books, to offer either to do like a story time or, something that they can also offer to the store while we can cultivate that relationship. So when they do come out with other titles, we can also work with them on those. Yeah.
I
find
having that hook,
sorry.
that connection to a story time
Mhm.
or something like that is
Yeah.
really good. I think the other really important thing to understand sometimes is that what works at one store, like what might work at Third Place Books, isn't going to work at Invitation Bookshop. And it has very little, it has pretty much nothing to do with the author or the book themselves. And oftentimes just has to do with who our customers are, what kind of volume we do in certain sections. And so I think that's an important thing to remember too. It's really hard in a creative field like this to remember that it also is business.
Yeah.
Business, and everybody has a different demographic. Like
Mhm.
sometimes one book is flying off the shelves at Ravenna, but not at our store or the
Mhm.
third part or another
Yep.
store. So location makes a big difference too. And what is appealing to that demographic in that location. And I also find what's really helpful, we do a lot of school visits with authors. And if you can get kids excited, and then you have that word of mouth, and also with the parents. So that really
Mhm.
helps also.
Yeah. As an author, I'll say, yes, that helps. It does help. I wanted to, here's a very specific question that someone submitted, one of our authors, and he wanted to know, is there anything that authors should know about Booksellers' challenges with Ingram's online ordering system, or with Ingram's behavior as a monopoly now that Baker and Taylor no longer distributes to regular bookstores?
We go to Ingram daily.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're right, it's a monopoly. So we used to be able to have better terms and better delivery. But because they are the only one, they're able more to call the shots. I always prefer to get the books from the publisher, if that makes sense. And we used to have partners too, and that's no more either.
Yeah, we're so young that we were never around when Baker and Taylor was still distributing the indies. So everybody talks about the Baker and Taylor days, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm missing out on. So I can't really, speak to that. I will echo though that there are times, because Ingram is it. It is frustrating. You do feel like your hands are tied a little bit, but I mean, it's that way in a lot of corporate environments in the United States right now. I think the biggest challenge with Ingram is that for a lot of really, really micro press that use Ingram, or for self-published authors, it's all out of their Tennessee warehouse, which for those of us here on the West Coast, that's not our primary warehouse. And so very rarely am I meeting the minimums required to pull those books in. So that's oftentimes why I will push authors to consignment, is if it's not distributed through Ingram's Oregon warehouse, it's not cost effective for us to bring it in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if it's at a less than, regular discount, that also makes it difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Will you guys explain for authors who may not understand the return? You talked a little bit before, somebody did, about returns and discounts. Could you just, explain that to someone who has no idea what it means? Me and other authors and illustrators.
So if you're buying from a publisher directly, it's usually around a 46% discount. Some smaller pubs, you can get a specials more, and sometimes it even increases to 50%, but you have to meet a certain quantity. If you go to Ingram and it's a regularly discounted book, then it's 43% discount. But then there are times when it's only 20% or 25%. And that is hard for me to do. And sometimes those books are also non-returnable, meaning I cannot return it. If it hasn't sold in a period of time, I'm not able to send it back to Ingram.
Okay.
And the other tricky thing with Ingram returns is even if a book is returnable, they charge a penalty.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not, whereas if I send a return to a publisher within the allotted time frame, I get credit for that book back. I mean, I'd rather sell it, but at least I get the credit for it. But with Ingram, I send that back and I'm getting a penalty. So I'm not getting my full credit back.
Okay.
That's a really good point.
And is that by publisher? The publisher obviously determines how it's going to be distributed. So there's really nothing an author or illustrator can do to affect that, or is there?
It depends who the publisher is.
Okay.
And like Allyson was talking about her store being on the smaller side. So sometimes for the smaller publishers, it would be hard to meet the minimum to get the discount that she needs and to make it returnable. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
Yes. See, we all think about just writing the darn book. We never think about the stuff that has to happen then to get it out into the real world. I want to talk about events because you have mentioned this, but I have many questions, because I think most authors, or a lot of authors, would love to do events, but there's this fear of, what if nobody comes? What if the bookstore doesn't want me to? It's so scary to even ask. It sounds like, no, actually, we would like to do more events. Or tell me the procedure, which kinds of events you're most interested in, all the event info. And then how can authors and illustrators partner in getting bodies there? That's a lot of questions. Let's do it.
I mean, we have a event request form on our website that authors can fill out if they would like to do an event or a reading or a signing or story time, and so that is like the initial, getting to know them, and then we can go from there. But no, we love to do events, and it's just as important for the author to publicize themselves as it is for us to market it. So if they can go around and, you know, word of mouth to friends, family, places they frequent, their, you know, their favorite coffee shops, putting up posters on community boards, like them advertising it is just as important as us advertising it.
I would second exactly what Kendra said. We also have a system in place where there's a form to fill out for an event. It also, like we're probably out 3 months for events. So and sometimes authors don't realize that in 4 weeks, we can't do that. We have to have more of a warning, more of a lead time. But and also the same for school events. And we have a offsite children's manager for offsite events, and then the events manager also. But definitely doing the word of mouth and bringing family, because nothing worse than having an event where people don't show up. I hate that.
Yes. And Allyson, you have a form as well?
We do have a form. Mary knows this. Mary's filled it out before. So yes, we do have a form on our website. It's hard for me to weigh in on this one because we haven't done a lot of children's events, just because we are right now in kind of a smaller space that makes doing well. Can I use yours as an example, Mary? Mary came and did a reading of her book, School of Fish, and then we did a craft with it. But because our children's section's so small, we moved the craft outside, which was great because it was an absolutely stunningly beautiful day. And it definitely, like, as people were walking in, I think we had kids walking in who stopped and did the craft and then went in and got Mary's book, even though they weren't there for the reading part of it. And it worked really, really well, but we are in Washington and doing crafts outside is not a year-round thing.
No.
So it's kind of hard because, we do get requests, and right now, just with the circumstances of our store, it's not something we've really established regularly. So we do kind of have to fiddle with that, and we're happy to do it. And it's nice when the author involved, like Mary, can be super flexible and say, like, absolutely, yes, that works for me. Let's figure out how to make this happen. Let's figure out a way for kids to have fun.
And I will say, yes, having no one show up to your event is kind of every author and illustrator's worst nightmare. And I did an event at Village Books that Kendra was at, where it was the day of the bomb cyclone. If you would like to have no one show up at your event, schedule it for the morning of the bomb cyclone. So there were like 2 families there and an older woman. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I drove up to I do love Village Books. I drove up to Bellingham. It's just this tiny crowd, but it's not always how many people are there, but who is there, because one of the people there happened to run the salmon in the classroom program for all of Whatcom County. And she ended up making a substantial purchase, and it worked out. And she and I have continued to be in touch. So, sometimes things. And I hope Bellingham didn't blow away. I got out of town quick because there was a threat that it might. But I know every author has that nightmare. But publicizing on social media, I liked, Kendra, your advice about cafes, getting the word out if you're very local. But it is hard to I got to do my first event at Third Place Books, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't know that many people in Seattle, but I partnered with a Seattle author who had a lot of people she knew who were able to come. So perhaps that's a little tip for some folks who would like to reach beyond their geographic boundaries.
Yeah, I mean,
go
sorry.
ahead, Kendra.
Just to add on to that, I mean, like, authors, they're creatives, but also be creative about like what you could do with your book. So like you said, like the School of Fish, like potentially like, partnering up with, a marine life center or something like that, or the salmon run, like you can get, creative. And like, we love to partner with other for-profit and nonprofits in Whatcom County. If someone came out with like a young adult book about, I don't know, soccer, but then we invited like the girls soccer team from the Bellingham, high school to come and like join us for the reading, just like finding that audience, and like you can be so creative
Mhm.
and fun with it.
See, and that's
Yes.
something that if you're talking to your booksellers, they're going to help you brainstorm those things,
Mhm.
right?
Mm.
Yeah. Talk to me
Absolutely.
about swag. Well, let's first, before swag, let's talk about pre-orders. It feels like when I first, there's just certain groups within the children's publishing industry that really pushes hard on pre-orders. I wanted, Village Books, will you please handle my pre-orders? And then everything that goes out will be signed. Are those a pain for you guys? Do you care? Do they make a difference? If I advertise that one store is going to be where all my pre-orders are handled from, what are your feelings on pre-order campaigns?
I think they do well, especially for young adult and adult books. I haven't seen a difference in, picture books for the pre-order. But if the books are signed in the store, then they're more likely faced out or on a display. So that also helps.
Exactly. Yes. The signing. And I agree with Kendra, YA and adult, we do the best with pre-orders. Though there has been a few times that we've done the board book about what babies eat from Woodinville, an author, and I'm trying to remember, I'm sorry. And she had a huge online presence. And so we sold a ton. And you just never know. But social media
Mhm.
for pre-order campaigns, a strong social media presence makes a big difference.
Okay.
And I would agree. Pre-order campaigns are work. Like there's no way around it. It's a lot of work, but every single one of those books ordered is a book we might not have otherwise sold.
Mhm.
We're in the middle of a pre-order campaign for a local author right now, and she put it out in her newsletter for I think the second time today. And we knew because we came in and the online order little tag on our point of sale system was a ridiculous number, and we were like, oh, it's the pre-order. And so those things, especially in January when books are a little bit slow. Like I'm always, I would never say no to a pre-order campaign because it helps us and it's good for relationship building with authors.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
let's say somebody has a book, they've not done a pre-order campaign before and they would like to do one. That's not an event. So is there a form for this too? Or what's the process for trying to set something like that up?
The author can reach out directly to the buyer, or for us, it would be me. And then I ask the person that's in charge of doing mail outs if that would work and be okay. Usually, and then if it has to be mailed out versus being picked up. But so in regards to swag, like you were talking, like if it's YA, a little poster or card works really well. Picture books, a lot of authors do special bookmarks or something that a child would like, but it has to be something because if we're mailing it, that can be mailed easily.
Mhm.
And
Kendra,
that's
any
an important
thoughts on
thing to
these things?
remember if you're putting swag in mailing, it can affect whether it qualifies for media mail, which can
Yes.
sometimes affect whether people are
Mhm.
willing to actually pay for postage on a pre-order or not. So that's, a bookmark you can tuck in and still call it
Mhm.
educational material. An enamel pin becomes a little bit more complicated to try to
Yes.
pretend like it's not in the envelope.
That's such a good point. Yes.
Yeah, I agree with both Rene and Allyson. Like working with we have like an online orders team and receivers. So in communication with all of them, making sure everyone can handle it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And also like figuring out logistics. So like because we're so close to Vancouver, BC, we do have to figure out like, oh, if we have some Canadian customers, how much is it going to be to send it to them? And sometimes it's the same price or double that the book costs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. We usually actually say we can't mail to Canada, but
Mhm.
we're not as close as you are. Yeah.
We still
Yeah.
offer it, but it's not going to be the same amount as everybody else.
Yeah, no, it can't
Sadly.
be. Yeah.
I have to say
Or
the
we're
joy of being a small store is when an email about a pre-order campaign comes in, I look at myself and I say like, oh, can we do this? And I don't have to talk to 3 other people. I just go to the staff. I'm like, hey guys, guess what?
so you're just a rock star because you do it all.
You are a rock star. Like she said, she wears a lot of hats.
Yes. How do I feel about setting this up on the computer and then mailing it and then posting about it on social media? Yeah, I see that.
And so that's a good thing for authors to think about, specifically for independent bookstores, is that everybody wears a lot of hats. And so it's, just to keep that in mind too.
Yeah. Um, I wanted to go back to what makes books popular in your stores. And I heard a good title and good cover art. But I feel like independent booksellers do so much hand selling. How can we make that job easier for you to hand sell our books?
To have arcs to give either to the buyer, which I hand out to the children's staff a lot. I keep some. It just depends, right? If it's horror, I hand it off. I don't read horror, but and then hopefully, that's the best thing. But I will tell you, I don't know if anybody, there was an author, Patrick Carmen, he was from Eastern Washington, and he self-published some books. This is probably 15 years ago, and he did school visits and then signings, and he did a thing with frosting, and he told the kids that he loved frosting, and all the kids brought frosting. He was very engaging with the kids, and we had lines for these books. I know. And so you just never know. It's about the connection that the authors can make with the audience a lot of times too.
Yeah.
And I,
Even like not, I mean, along with arcs, like a digital
Oh,
arc
yes.
is also, because then I can share it with the staff and be like, look at this on your 15-minute break because it's really cool. And then, or an author coming in and even just like chatting up the booksellers. Like we have people in our store who are really passionate about kids' books, and then we have booksellers who don't want to touch the kids section with a 10-foot pole. But sometimes
Yes.
those are the booksellers that get excited after talking to an author, like, oh, they told me all about their book and it actually sounds really good. And I'm like, yeah, kids' books are awesome. Open one.
That's right. I know. Open one. Look.
yeah, I think the digital arcs, especially with picture books,
Yeah.
Not everybody can print like a big, effigy
No.
of a picture book. So being able to even look at, the PDFs of a picture book and kind of know what it is and be able to share that with staff. I have someone on staff who any spare moment she has, she will go sit in the picture book section. And if she falls in love with the picture book, I know, not because I've talked to her, but because all of a sudden, like every single copy we had left the store in like 2 days. Because she's great at it. So being able to share things in advance with those booksellers and build that anticipation so they know this thing is coming. I'm really excited about it, because a lot of times, the buyer isn't necessarily the one who's always on the floor hand selling. So being able to share that kind of stuff with staff is really helpful too.
Yeah, that is such a good point. We on like new release Tuesday, all the picture books are stacked, the singles of each title, and then the staff in the kids section read them all. So they know, and they always have their favorites. And then they'll say, "Oh, I love that." And I'm like, I look at it because you bought it 3 or 4 months ago, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I remember this now." Sometimes I don't.
You tell them you do. Yeah.
I do.
And getting the arc is different from seeing it on, I'm sure I'm pronouncing it. I always have said Edelweiss. Is that right? So is
Yes.
getting an arc different than seeing it there? You want both?
Well, I'm
no. I mean, physical arcs are nice just because I mean, I don't know any reader who is like, "Ooh, I can't wait to get my e-reader out and sniff it and enjoy the experience of reading on my e-reader." But it's a tool, and sometimes we have to use e-readers, and that's fine. Print arcs can be expensive. Publishers are doing fewer of them too. So I think we've all kind of adjusted to that ecosystem where, like, sometimes, yes, you have to read things digitally. I will say though, sometimes that's hard because it's not physically on my nightstand screaming at me to read it. And so they do sometimes, like for me at least, sometimes my e-arcs get a little bit lost, or my DRC.
I'll second that, definitely.
Oh.
And also, I think I'm dating myself age-wise, but it's taken me a while to get accustomed to reading on an e-reader versus a hard book. That's what I like the best. But if I'm really excited by a picture book on Edelweiss that you can open, I run back and I share it with everybody. I have them open it and to see, you know. So
Awesome. I know that Invitation Books does a preview of books that are coming out, but you have not included children's books in that. Do any thoughts about doing that? And do your stores do that at all? Where oh, we can tell you about some of the newest and greatest books that are coming out in the spring. And are other stores doing that you guys know of?
Do you want me to contextualize what that is a little bit?
Would you please? Yes,
Yes.
because I did a
So-
horrible job explaining it.
No, it's fine. So it actually kind of started as a fun online thing for fall where we just read ahead a whole, I mean, we did what we do anyway, which is reading the things that are coming out. And we turned it into an event where our booksellers just basically pitch the books that they're most looking forward to. And then we open them up for a certain number of days for discounted pre-orders. And so it really helps kind of drive excitement about books, and everybody kind of gets to see what's coming. So it started in fall. We also do a summer one. We do not do one for winter or spring because we would have to do it in November or December, and we already established nothing extra is happening during those months. We haven't done one for kids, mostly because of capacity. Typically there's 4 or 5 of us on staff. And so to read, then we usually highlight close to 30 books. So for all of us to really be able to read and talk about books, and we do try to make sure every single one we put on preview, we're not perfect at it, but we at least try to make sure the vast majority get read cover to cover by someone. It takes a lot of time. So doing kids just hasn't happened yet. It is something we have talked about. Because I mean, like this year, Impossible Creatures by Catherine Rundell came out, and we had 2 booksellers who read it and loved it. And we would have loved to, to get the word out about a book like that we just, I mean, we do in other ways, but not in that same kind of venue and format.
still, that's really impressive what you're doing.
It's so
30
much
books
work,
is a
it's so much
lot.
fun.
Yeah. I guess we use
Yes.
social media
Yes.
and to help preview some books. I guess, and then we have a subscription box, but that's sort of a surprise. I don't know that we do anything. People seem to know when the big books are coming out. I get I am not involved in it. I don't think. And then events, a lot of times events are for when the book is coming out. So those are listed that we're
Okay.
excited about.
So Village Books has a printed, and it's online, but it's also printed, we call it the Chuckanut Reader. But it's a magazine that we come out with, I think it's 4 or 5 times a year. So it's seasonal, and it has reviews of books from booksellers, from the owners. It lists events that we're having throughout the season. There's gift items in there. There's just everything. And I think we send mail out 1,000.
Wow. Hey, that's
Yeah.
impressive.
Yeah, so we have a lot of them. And it's just a really fun thing for people to come in and be like, oh, I need to go get the new Chuckanut Reader.
Yeah.
So I don't know how long they've been doing it because the store's been open since 1980 and I've only been there for 5 years. But the whole time I've been there, we've had the Chuck and a Reader.
Were you even born by 1980?
A few years later.
I was afraid of that. Yes.
Yeah.
I would add though, really quick, Mary, kind of tying into being able to see books in advance. One of the things that we've found is really effective. And again, I'm just going to mention Impossible Creatures because it's front of mind. I had read that before it came out. So on release day on our social media manager always puts up singles. And if somebody's read it and liked it, she'll always put a little note on the slide, like Allyson read and loved this one. And that also is really effective. We had people that week coming in like, what was that book that Allyson liked that had the pretty edges? So even if there's not, that formal preview element, a lot of times just being able to see it in advance so we can call it out specifically on social media drives sales as much as anything else.
I would agree with that. If we feature something that just came out on social media, that really helps a lot. And especially like you said, if somebody's read it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Social media has been pretty amazing when it comes to books in the last few years with like podcasts and book talk and Instagram, like the times that someone is taking out their phone to be like, oh, this book talker that I follow wants me to says I should get this book. It's crazy.
It is crazy. I agree. Yeah.
It's
It
really
is crazy.
changed the business.
But it's also, as an author, like the coolest thing when a bookstore posts a picture of your book. It's one of those things that you're just like, oh my God, I can't believe this. Now, on the other hand, I want to know, because I do this, and you can tell me stop doing this, Mary. But when I go to a bookstore, I go see if my book's on the shelf. And if it is, I take a picture. I happen to post one today and I tag the bookstore. And I say,
Yes.
you can get my book here. I was out in Sumner. I'd never been to the bookstore there last week. And I was shocked to see I'm still shocked to see my books on shelves. And so I took a picture and tagged the bookstore. Do you guys hate that? And you're like, oh my God, another author tagging
No,
our
I
bookstore.
love that. We love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if we're not super busy, please ask if you can sign it.
That's the next question, is about signing stock. Does it make a difference in terms of sales? Does it vary by age category? And is it worth doing for any other reason? I've also heard that it makes it more difficult to return stock. So talk to me about signing stock.
Oh. I think signed stock is helpful. There's two things. I love when an author comes in and I say, oh yeah, I do have it here. Go ahead and sign. And then we put a sticker on it and try to face it out if there's space available. The other time it can be like sometimes I'll have local authors as a group come by or want to go to all three stores. They call it what do they call it? A crawl, a bookstore crawl. And what I found, what we don't do as frequently is bring in extra books than what we already have to sign, because like you said, it can be difficult to return if they don't sell.
I think one of the things for us too, in terms of signed stock, I don't know that them being specifically signed always makes a difference. But if an author wants to come in and sign books, I would say first definitely email, because we're tiny. I shouldn't say tiny, we're small. And I don't always have books on hand. Actually, Mary sent an author my way. And when I went to look in the catalog to order the book, I had flagged it and just hadn't come back to it to order it. So it was that good reminder for me. And then the author came in, and invariably while authors are in the store, if you're in the store signing your book, there are probably children in our children's section, which means you are probably going to very easily be able to sell a book because that child or that parent is wondering why you're writing in the book. And all of the authors we've had come in, you're children's book authors, you're good at engaging with children. And so it naturally creates some excitement about the book. And then like Rene said, if it's signed, I'm more likely to put it face out. So, it's not necessarily the signature always, but it definitely changes the placement of the book.
Good to know.
And
do you
you're
see
right
this?
about, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead, Renee.
Oh no, what Allison said about, especially if you're signing in the kids section, it's true. If you have families there with kids, it definitely engages them, and oftentimes a book sale. It just, yeah, it naturally happens.
I don't think I've ever had an author come in signing while there were kids in the kids section and not sell a book.
I've sold my book in your store, not just mine, but then I'd be like, well, do you also know my friend Amanda has a book that's right next to it that you might also enjoy? So, yeah.
Mary's hired.
If only. If only. And what about signing at Village Books, Kendra?
I agree with both Renee and Allison. Like, it does just organically create that environment where you get to talk and like hopefully sell your book. And it does usually end up either faced out or on a display. Yeah.
Okay. We're closing in on the end here. I do have another question before we wrap up, in that you guys have all given me I am not even going to talk to you guys from about November through the 1st of January because it's so crazy busy. But what about the poor authors who have books coming out then? And they're thinking, I wanted to do a launch. I wanted to do, what's your advice for them? A launch in January is going to be just as lovely, or what are we thinking?
If they know that their book is coming out in November, December is really, we can't do December. But if they know ahead of time, and usually at least a year, that it's coming, you can try to arrange a time where there's a story time or an event 6 months in advance, and that way it's in the books, it's already happening, because we do events in up until Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I would echo that. We're booking events months out, and so even if a book comes out in November or January, we should be contacted well ahead of that anyway. So
Yes.
adding that to the events calendar isn't a problem because we're already planning for that particular busyness. It's when, we're in the middle of holiday busyness and somebody comes with their, 400-page book that they want us to read to decide if we want to carry it before it comes out next week. That's where it's just not going to happen.
No. It definitely won't happen. That's too hard, because your brain, you're already on overload. You're already trying to do so many other things at that time. And to be honest with you, I will tell you, January is pretty busy too, in the sense book fairs, and then all the rep appointments for spring and summer start happening. So, and then I also start marking returns. So always busy.
Is there a downtime? Is there a month or a couple of months throughout the year where these are our 2 least busy months? If people want to plan a little, I want to do a store crawl with my friends and come see some stores.
For us, it's summer.
Okay.
Ours used to be summer, but not anymore.
Not anymore.
We have, with
is it because of the
tourism,
college? Oh yeah.
Yeah, the college, there's tourism ramping back up since after COVID, and people want to be out doing things. So
Yeah.
we barely have a slow time. But yeah, like you guys were saying, like if it comes out in December, don't reach out the 1st of December. Reach out, a few months ahead. And then hopefully, maybe, fingers crossed, we can work something out.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think that's the important thing to remember, as we talk about the holidays, the problem with December is things can't be moved in December.
Yeah.
We're busy right now with summer ordering and stuff. And yeah, there's certain things that can't be moved. But for the most part, if I know, this author wants to come in on this day and drop off their book or sign books, I can fit that into my workflow in a way in February or April or July or whenever that I can't in December, because I just can't.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to like, communication and respect from the author as well. Like just be understanding, since we are, wearing a lot of hats or just really busy, that we do want to try to work it out. It just might take a lot of back and forth before we get to like a conclusion of, this is what we can do.
Mhm.
That was
But like we
perfectly
do
said.
want to get to that.
Yeah.
Well, and I've learned things don't have to happen on the day books come out. I mean, and for good reason. I've had 2 books delayed months. So, if your release is in December, a January celebration might be just fine.
Mhm.
So I want to thank all of you. I think it's been some great information that people see. Now you're not scary at all. For my friends who are like, how could you ever talk to booksellers? Well, I could unfortunately talk to booksellers for many, many hours. That's unfortunate for you guys. I would like to, maybe we could go around in the same order that we started. Start with Rene, and just if you have any closing thoughts, any advice for authors and illustrators, love to hear them.
Um, oh, just, keep reaching out. Just give us time to get back and to find a time that we can look at your book. I also love when people just, or if it's coming out from a publisher, just giving me a heads up and that you're local. That's really good information for me to know. Because then when I go to that catalog, I'll know that information and, make sure to, put down copies for all the stores.
Good. Kendra?
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Mary and Allison and Renee. Like this has been wonderful. And just sharing ideas is always wonderful with other booksellers and book people. Like Renee said, like, you know, hyper local focus, let us know that you're from the area or in the area. And that, you want to partner and work together, because we want to partner and work with you too.
Good. And Allison?
I think echoing to some degree, what we've talked about a lot already is a lot of it comes down to that relationship you have with your bookstore and your booksellers. We are all incredibly deeply invested in our community and what that means on both a macro and a very micro scale. And so knowing that an author sees the value in what we do as bookstores and wants to build that relationship and wants to sell their book through independent bookstores. You want to sell as many of your books as possible, but you also want to sell your books through independent bookstores. And so seeing that those values are reciprocal is really important to us.
Good. Do you ever go onto authors' websites to see where they link their books?
Yes.
Do you?
Yes. Yeah.
I haven't done that.
Check mine out,
Oh.
Kendra.
That's part of
I
our
do.
consignment agreement.
What's
In
that?
our consignment, part of our consignment agreement is that there has to be some kind of link, whether it's directly to us or to something like Bookshop that supports indie bookstores. If it is just mega bookseller, I don't even call them booksellers. I don't have booksellers, like mega stores that want to, use books as loss leaders and promote their own imprints and do all kinds of other shady things, then, that tells me a lot about values.
When I receive emails from authors, I do usually go right to their website to see where they link their books. And if it is only the big A, then I will kindly suggest them adding a Bookshop link as well.
This is such
And I
good.
think
Thank
that's the
you.
important
I
thing.
didn't
Like, it
think
doesn't
about
have
that.
it doesn't, it doesn't have to be to my store. It just has to be to the independent bookstore ecosystem because of what that actually means in the world right now.
Absolutely.
And that matters.
That's such a good point. It does matter.
Well, and as authors and illustrators, we want to be partners, and that doesn't just mean you all supporting us. It means we have to support you. So that said, I own more book socks and notebooks and candles and books than many people, but they're all cozy. So, and you can never have enough book themed socks, really.
No,
You really
cannot.
can't. I really, really appreciate your time. I appreciate your wisdom, and I appreciate your caring for the kid lit community and kid readers, because I mean, from little bitties to young adult, books are offering a great perspective on the world, a great escape from the world, all the things that we need. And you're doing good work out there. So thank you to all of you. And thanks to everybody for tuning in.